Welcome and thank you for joining as I review Pennsylvania's financial literacy mandates and standards. We'll get into this. Before I do, I always like to say, for those that have led the charge to get these standards into schools, I thank you, but this is a critical review. No state that I've reviewed so far can meet two minimum standards. Number one, meeting the minimum education standards of other topics required in school. No state comes remotely close. And number two, no state adequately prepares youth for the near term financial challenges. Things like what happens when they turn 18 and get a flood of credit card applicants? What happens when they move out on their own? How do they make a college loan decision? No student graduates prepared to even make those basic decisions. So I'm appreciative of these standards, but this will be a critical review. And let's dive in. As I review the bill, in addition, they also wrote up an education framework for schools. So I'll review both of those because they work together. This on the policy side, this on the administration side. So let's dive in. Let's look first at the bill. And I just put this page up there to let you know what version I'm using, but I found an interesting thing right here. March 10th, 1949. So they've been adding to this bill over the years. And this isn't just financial literacy, it really dictates what's going on in schools. But it's interesting to think that in this total document size is about 130 pages. It's interesting to think with all the major changes since the 1940s, major changes, they're still just modifying existing guidelines for schools. You would think with the advent of computers and other major innovations since the 1940s, it would be a complete overhaul. Instead, schools still teach the same subjects they did 100 years ago. That's an aside. Let's dive into the actual bill. And on this jumps ahead to page 112 for those that are following along. And essentially, it starts off with just outlining that there is a personal finance program required, and there's a current curriculum and standards that the Department of Education in Pennsylvania created over the years. So the first one was in 2014. They outlined a framework which was called the model curriculum, and they've been updating that through the years. So a lot of this is talking about making sure that's updated and making sure it's distributed to schools, which I think is good. It's always good when they start with a framework and making sure it can be distributed. So I think that's a good place to start. I'll get into a little more meat here on page 113, the very top. I like this a lot. They say, including the basic principles involved with earning, spending, saving, and investing money. Now, why do I like this? A lot of states, the politicians will list 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 topics for them to cover. And the common language is schools must teach these topics, right? So it's required, the politicians are requiring schools to teach certain topics. Now, they don't know much about teaching personal finance in many cases. So for them to mandate topics, I don't think is good. We look at Massachusetts bill, they're mandating teaching online stock trading and cryptocurrency. That can be very dangerous to teach to a 16, 17, 18-year-old, right? In Florida, they're mandating teaching what to do with inheritance money. Now, that may not apply to the whole class. So I like when they leave it open and available for the administrators to decide on what's most important for schools to teach. I do like loose guidelines there. And basically, down line 8 is talking about updating the model curriculum as well. You'll hear this quite a bit through this bill, and that was again created in 2014. Moving on to the next page, and that's really all that page says. And you can read the bill more in depth if you do like. Um, and it's basically talking about the distributing the model curriculum again. Just basically, hey, they need to maintain and distribute it. That's really all they're saying. So a lot of repetition in those first few pages. But again, I did like that they did not list a bunch of random topics. Here's where we get a little deeper in. They are, if you look at line item 4, provide a mandatory course in personal financial literacy. Wonderful. With a value of at least 1/2 credit or half a full credit. So a half a credit in Pennsylvania is 60 hours. What that really translates to in teacher language is about 50 hours, because you need to account for administration time, students goofing around time, bell periods, all that fun stuff that occurs during a normal class. So about 50 instructional hours. Now, I did not see them say standalone. So this is a mandatory course, but they did not have the word standalone. I did not see that anywhere throughout here. So with the bill, at least on the bill side, not the administration side, this could be really, they have the freedom to integrate it into any other coursework. We're big advocates and proponents of standalone coursework so they can get the focus, time, and rigor. And also students understand the importance of the course when it is standalone. So I think a big missing word there. The other thing I don't like here in line 7, it allows them to complete the course in grade 9, 10, 11, or 12. Now, why is that bad? Because if I'm teaching a freshman these topics, by the time they're needing to utilize this material, now they might be able to use some basic budgeting and things, but by the time they're making decisions on moving out on their own, on these different, going to college and these different major decisions, oftentimes they can forget that, especially over a span of 4 years. So I like, if we're having limited time, which this is only one semester, very limited, it needs to be in the later years so they can actually apply what they learn. And that actually does a lot to reduce learning loss as well. So again, line 7 is very problematic there for me. Moving forward, going down the line, let's skip that page because a lot of it is the one part I like is they're going to work with outside agencies to help craft and refine the model curriculum and education materials. I think that's good. I think that's great. And a big problem I had with the model curriculum, they don't list who has been involved in there. We scoured the internet and looking for that and reached to that conclusion. We couldn't find that in the document itself. It's stated nowhere. So I like when there's transparency so we can evaluate the quality of who's putting those materials together. But I do like the fact they mentioned they'll work with outside agencies. I think that is critically important. And then finally on this page, we have they're talking about teacher training, and they're leaving it up to the schools to decide on what types of certifications that teachers need, but they need to have at least some knowledge in or have their teaching credentials in family, consumer science, business, computer information technology, math, and social studies, which that's just any type of teacher. Now, it's critical. They missed a key thing. Teaching personal finance is different. They need to provide instructor in-depth and comprehensive education on how to teach. It's different in all those subjects they mentioned. And here's one main reason why. Every student in there has different habits, relationship with money, different goals, different financial situations, socioeconomic background. It takes a really good understanding of behavioral finance principles, education methodologies, and how we adapt that to personal finance, and many other factors there that aren't taught in traditional coursework. There's a huge emotional attachment to that, and it's related to people's esteem and overall well-being. And there's a huge risk when the teachers aren't trained on how to teach the subject matter. So it's a big missing piece in there. And again, it continues with the teacher education piece there. And in here, really, it's a lot to protect the current teachers, because with they're not allowing outside teachers that have a specialty in teaching personal finance to come in and teach. And this is often due to teachers' unions. They want to maintain control of the teachers. They have to go through their process and protocols. So it's always a big fight to get really. You can have a more highly qualified teacher that hasn't taught, doesn't have a traditional high school teaching license, that is more competent and efficient in teaching. So some problems there. Again, things I liked. I like they gave them some flexibility. I don't like the fact that they didn't require a high level of teacher training, which we all know teachers are the biggest indicator of student success. They are giving them freedom between 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. And it's not a standalone class. It was not mentioned in the bill. Maybe on the administration side they'll address that, but at least with the bill, they did not. So on the bill side, not looking too good. But whenever you're enacting any type of education policy, there's the policy side, and then we have the administration side, which I'll get to now. And you heard them talk about the model curriculum quite a bit. And I'm glad they actually have that. A lot of states, what happens is they'll just list a bunch of topics, they'll give it to the administration, and the administration will say, hey, teachers, go teach us. Here's some free resources, find them online. At least this administration went through and has a pathway and guidelines for those teaching, which is supposed to be on learner outcomes, but there are some major problems there, as you will see. First problem is the bill, I'll say about 20 times, referred to model curriculum, right? And that there's model curriculum formed in 2014. The new name as of 2024 is Academic Standards for Personal Finance. So if I'm a teacher, and if you look at the Google results, the first two are number one and number three results are the 2014 standards that come up. The middle one doesn't really have any links to this. So it's problematic. What teachers do when they're lesson planning, if you're not a teacher, you probably don't know this, but oftentimes they'll look up online. Yeah, sometimes there are department sites and things you look up to, but oftentimes those are very complex to navigate. A lot of teachers rely on Google and similar. Look, first thing there is model for curriculum. They mentioned 20 times in that model or in the bill, and I'm be teaching the old standard. So the basic housekeeping and cleaning that needs to be done there to help. The real problem is with the actual learning. I'll give you an example out of the document and a few good things as well. The first thing, the first big problem is in this document, Academic Standards for Teaching for Personal Finance. They list 62 lessons with over 100 subtopics, right? That's a lot to cover in only 50 teachable hours. Again, 60 hours, which is the class, but really teachable hours is about 50 teachable hours. There's no way you can cover that with the degree of rigor and depth required to make any meaningful difference. It's way too many topics, way too many subjects, and they don't fit together. What I mean by that, there's no cohesive vision behind it. Let me give you an example. A great vision would be for high school students to bring everything together under a vision of making them self-sufficient so they can move out and gain independence, right? That's a very cohesive vision. Then everything fits under there. It's a principle of backwards design, basic education principle that they fail to even think about or address. So big problem there. Additionally, as you read through this document, most of the language is low order thinking skill sets, as you see here. Understand, define, explain. All those things are very low level skill sets. And these two frameworks are Bloom's taxonomy of higher order thinking and Webb's depth of knowledge. Every teacher's familiar with that. But again, when they built the standards, they did not rely on that at all. There's a few examples where I thought were good. I'll point out in a second. The majority was all low level skills. The problem is when you're teaching low level understanding, recall, reproduction, they'll be able to pass a post test, but it's not going to be able to benefit them in their life and long term. Learning loss is steep. They don't know how to apply it. They don't have the confidence in executing, where when we have them creating and planning and executing and analyzing, those are high order thinking skill sets that last longer, and we can actually have them apply things that they're learning that are relevant in their life in the near term. Again, that's why I'm an advocate of, if we're only going to do one semester, making sure it's later in their career. Let's look at this is the first one came up, and a few good things here. I like the fact that they laid out standards for kindergarten through 12th grade. Wonderful job. I didn't see any mention of elementary school education in the bill. So administration, excellent job on expanding that vision. I think there's a huge need. And I like how they broke it down. It's broken down based on their cognitive abilities, also their developmental states. That's very key. So that's a positive. I saw a lot of bad things. First, let's look at K through second. I'll get into my main focus here is on the high school standards, but let's look at K through second first, because It's way too advanced. Throughout this whole document, it's way too advanced. Let me read this for you. Identify short-term financial goals and steps people can take to achieve them, and explain how limited personal finance resources affect choices people make. Way too advanced. K through second. In addition, the whoever wrote this needs to understand at that developmental stage, these kids are selfish. Not knocking kids. That's just how they are at developmental stage. Me, mine, I. Right. That's how they are. And it'd be very easy to adapt these to be like, asking the kids in class, hey, do you have any, what grade do you want for this class? Right? Oh, I want A, I want a B. Okay, that's a goal. So we need to bring it down to a personal level. We need to explain what goals are first. We're just jumping to identify short term financial goals. Well, we need to identify what goals are in a way that they're comfortable with. We can't introduce finances into this until they're understanding of what a goal is on a personal level. Then we can say, are you in sports? Okay, what type of, what are your goals there? Hey, does anybody saving money here? Okay, what are your goals there? What are you trying to save for, right? And then we can explain that's a goal. So the standards is written way too advanced. The other major problem, let's skip to grades 9 through 12. They start at a place where it's too high. These standards are meant to guide teachers. It should provide step-by-step guides as far as the skills that the students need to develop to have a clear outcome. They fail to do so. They jump right ahead. So assume a 10th grader has no idea on goals, has no idea on opportunity costs or understanding process of writing goals, right? Assume that, which a lot won't. You may have some that do, but a lot won't. And if you go over these goals, determine the financial impact of various long-term goals, then apply systematic decision-making process, including opportunity costs, to setting and achieving financial goals. It's half the class, maybe. I don't know the level, but for a lot of these people, they need to explain what goals are. They need to explain what opportunity cost is. This should be written in the standards. And in addition, they're missing a huge opportunity here. What's that opportunity? To create the goals, high order thinking skill set, create your personal goals, right? Now, we can't just start there. I think the standards as written for K through second, third through fifth, sixth grade should all be ninth through 12th. The reason being, even if I'm teaching this in the third grade, describe reasons people set financial goals. Developing reasons is critical in teaching personal finance. It's one of the most important things that needs to be done to teach personal finance or any subject. By the time, 10 years later, they're going to forget the reasons to set goals. And if we don't include that, hey, develop reasons to set financial goals in that training when they're in high school, they are never, no way they're going to remember that from the third to fifth grade. Okay. So all of these need to be pushed into, they all need to be reworked first off. Let's move on to factors influencing income. And one of the lists they have here is use data to support an individual's decision to obtain or forgo post-secondary education based on the cost and anticipation of future income, right? Well, in all of their standards, they have nothing about career planning, nothing about deciding on a career in that pathway. So how are they going to plan for higher education when they haven't planned for a career? So that's a basic factor missing that needs to be included. And plus, to make data-driven decisions, as they outline here, I think that's a good thing. And I think I would change the language to create a plan for your decision to go to school or not, right? So make it personalized and having them create a plan, again, higher order thinking skill sets. It's not just using the data for some random case study. The way this reads now, I can give them an example of some random third-party person. And if they can solve that example, that's using data-driven decisions to make that decision. Instead, it would be much better if they created a career plan for themselves and went forward with that. Again, major misstep there. If we look ahead to, let's go ahead to perfect savings and investing. So if we look here, again, we're in our senior year or high school, developing a savings plan for short and long-term financial goals. And we're comparing features of various saving vehicles. right? But if we don't know what a savings plan is, how to save, have a budget, all those basics that are described in these younger ages, they're not going to get this topic at all. And the same problem exists with their lessons on uh, risk and insurance. Again, the foundation lessons are before. So every high school student should know, starting a thing at kindergarten, identify risk in everyday situations. Many high school students don't, right? I've been there, you've been there. Many people don't know risk in everyday, and that needs to be the first lesson in high school, not evaluate a person's potential financial risk, loss of personal property, reduction in income and liability. Otherwise, you're going to lose 75% of the class. They also need to describe how unexpected events could impact a person's finances, right? Automobile accidents, illness, that's in the third grade. Nobody's going to remember that in their senior year or sophomore year. Provide examples of financial risk, right? Losing a job, and it's very similar to what's covered in the senior year, but they need that foundational knowledge. And again, I guess you can do some of these lessons in younger grades, but we need, because there's huge gaps in time that we're teaching personal finance, we need to ensure that when we start to deliver the semester instruction, we catch everybody up for those that don't know. Because like unlike other classes, there is no we don't have with other math science, you have remedial math, you have basic math, and you have college prep math, and you have AP math, and then you have college level math, right? But with personal finance, it's like, no, one class for everybody. Doesn't matter your knowledge, everybody takes this one class and done. We don't have that luxury. So it's really important that these standards and these things are laid out properly. There must be meticulous, and you must think through every single step so teachers have a clear plan and path to teach these students effectively. Without that, we're going to yield very poor results. And again, I'm appreciative of the efforts of who put this together, but it's missing the mark on any type of focus on research-based education methodologies, not working kids toward higher order thinking skill sets. It's not scaffolding lessons, so they're building skill sets that they need at the appropriate times to actually execute and apply that. So it's a huge missed opportunity. Let's get into the rating of this overall bill. Let me add this to the stage here, and let's take a look. So again, we rate this on a 12-point scale, looking at program structure, lesson plans, educators and leadership, and program support. They get either a X, yellow circle, or green check. Obviously, you can kind of figure out which one those are good. Let's get to the first one. Delivered in a standalone class and integrated into other subjects. Well, I didn't see standalone class there. The administration may have that in mind, but from the bill perspective, they failed to mention that. And also, there's no mention in that bill of integration into other subjects, which for this topic, it's critical, especially when you only have 50 instructional hours. Think about it. Your work week is 50 hours. You work for 50 hours a week, well, maybe 40, whatever, but you work for 50 hours a week. They're getting less than a week of financial education, and it's not integrated in any other class, anything like that. Major fail there. Time and rigor fail on a few accords. Not enough time, and we've highlighted way too many topics to cover in a short period of time, and the lack of using higher or working kids to higher order thinking skill sets. I would love if every student had created a budget to move out on their own, created a plan to pay for college or not go to college, right? All these things are based on created a plan to build and maintain a positive credit history and executed the steps needed to in a safe, secure environment. They did not do that. No mention of ongoing education or long-term support. Again, we have that benefit of other classes where there's progression, not here now. They did, the administration did write standards for the younger age levels, which is wonderful. So I like that they're at least thinking that way, but as far as ongoing support for high school level, it's not there. Relevant content that prepares students for near-term life events, absolutely no mention of the content they're using or so forth. So I'm going to give them an X there now. And it does not prepare them for near-term life events. Everything would be so simple if they just design programs based off the half a dozen key mistakes youth make when they move out on their own or when they grow into adulthood. There's credit mistakes. There's money management mistakes, meaning with their banks, etc. They don't know how to move out on their own. They're living with their parents till they're in the 30s, many cases. There's many issues with other things that are involved in their rental history and things of that nature. They don't graduate with a resume, knowing how to get a job, knowing how to earn income. These are basic things we teach. They decide on student loans without having any idea what it means to pay back $50,000. Right? Adults, when you tell adults it's a $50,000 loan, they're fearful because they know what it means to pay it back. But for high school students, they don't know, oh, 50 grand, no big deal, right? They don't understand the work it takes to pay that back. Adopt proven curriculum that encourages higher order thinking and application. I'm going to give them a check for no there as well, because there was no mention of that. In fact, their standards point to that they're going to be selecting curriculum based off just being able to pass a post-test major failure. No mention of customized lesson plans based on student needs. Well, in the bill, they did mention about special ed students, which is a given, right? And that's important. But there's every student's different. There's students in lower socioeconomic status that have a high level of knowledge of budgeting, delayed gratification, and limited hope for the future. That's my personal experience in teaching them for many years. And I've worked with youth in the higher end, higher socioeconomic ladder that had very little knowledge of budgeting, very little ability to delay gratification, and they had a lot of hope for the future. So a big problem there. Courses led by highly qualified instructors. Nope, they didn't mention any. They said the administration can decide on additional certification, so they have potential there, right? But what I've seen in other states, they'll mention something like that, and they'll roll out no extra programs, no extra training, and they'll say, hey, you need to teach personal finance. This is on your docket here this year. You need to teach it. They're like, oh, I don't know how to. Well, we figure it out, right? That's very common, because they don't want to spend the money for teacher training. And it's a huge missed opportunity. Teachers are the number one indicator of a student's outcome in that class. You can have a wonderful teacher with the worst curriculum, that class and the student's going to have a great experience. The opposite is not true. Programs deployed and managed by experienced leaders. I'm glad they did a standard framework, but there's so many missing parts. These errors seem to be basic, right? I don't think they've taught personal finance. I don't know why they're not consulting with people that have years and decades of experience in teaching personal finance. Not just us, but there's other great groups and individuals out there doing wonderful things. They're missing a piece. And again, they didn't include a list of who helped develop these standards. So my guess is they tapped Gary from accounting. Hey, go create these standards there. Learner outcome focus and assess. Absolutely no mention of that in there. My guess is I'll have a post test that's required to pass. But again, that's not anything to be too thrilled about, right? So post test content knowledge is one thing in personal finance, but everybody knows how to build good credit. Everybody knows how to budget. Everybody knows these basics once you get into adulthood. But the problem is to follow through. So we need to measure behaviors, confidence in making decisions, other factors that will really focus on the outcomes of the students. There's no funding mentioned, but I did read in the other part of the document. I did not show these programs. They can't. They have to include funding, so there is some funding there. My guess is it will be a battle with other departments. That's what commonly happens when they don't allocate a special fund for that. They'll say, okay, hey, we got to do financial literacy program, and then they'll need to battle with the economics department, social studies, the math department for funding. And those departments are very entrenched and ingrained in academia. They have a lot of contacts, and it's hard for new programs to get that funding they deserve because they're clawing back. They don't want to release funding there. So I'll give them a yellow circle there. I'm gonna give them a yellow circle here too. The bill says nothing about starting lessons in elementary school, but again, I commend the administration. Now the standards are way off. There's no way what they have there provides even a halfway decent outline for kids, but I'm glad they're thinking about it. Most states don't even consider that, and financial habits form between 7 and 9 years old. So it's a critical age, but those kids' standards need to be completely redone. And lastly, encourage parental involvement, red X there. So not looking too good. No green checks, a couple mediocres, and that is Pennsylvania, sadly. Our goal is to help elevate standards. So I don't just come on here to, to put these people down and so forth. In fact, I'm supportive of them. I want to help them. And there's better ways to do that. We actually have a policy and framework guide for those policymakers in passing legislation and also school administrators that outline the very basic minimum education standards required of other topics. Again, everything I mentioned on those 14 or 12 areas are just minimum education standards required by any other subject. So math, English, science, they would all require to meet those minimum education standards that I outlined. And yet with personal finance, the most important subject, I would argue, for high school students and college students, with personal finance, no, we're just going to do whatever, right? Don't worry about the research. Don't worry about the education principles. Don't worry about what makes other programs successful. Just we're going to teach personal finance like some random workshop where you give them less than a work week of education and expect any type of decent outcome. It's a major failure. Kids are going to suffer because of it. The second thing we ask is that every student graduates able to make near-term financial decisions. Seems basic to me, seems logical, seems like we have the moral authority, and it seems like we're protecting kids. But again, schools are very slow to change. I'm appreciative of those that helped get the foot in the door with this bill. Now it's time to kick in the door. These kids need us. We look at the numbers out there. People are suffering, sleepless nights, suicides, divorce, major, can't afford healthcare, can't afford food. People are going hungry. Kids are going hungry. And then, let's teach math, algebra 2 or chemistry or biology instead. Absolutely ridiculous. It's time to step up the game. Please follow us. Please support us here on this YouTube channel. Please also help us get this message into schools and to policymakers and to really advocate for financial literacy. You wish you were taught about money in high school. I wish I was as well. We can do better for the next generation. So please join us.